After losing their teenage son in a car accident, Michael and Sarah Collins visited his grave every Sunday for 3 weeks straight. They discovered their flowers were placed with blue forget-me-nots and small meaningful items that connected to their son's life. Determined to solve this mystery, they concealed a camera among the flowers. When they played back the footage, they both froze in absolute disbelief. The cold morning air wrapped around Michael and Sarah Collins as they walked through Oak Ridge Cemetery. 6 months had passed since losing their son Ethan, but the pain remained as fresh as the day they received the devastating call about the car accident. Their Sunday visits had become a ritual to maintain the connection with their 17-year-old boy. When they reached Ethan's grave, they stopped abruptly. The flowers they had left the previous week were gone, replaced with blue forget-me-nots. A small polished river stone sat at the base of the headstone. Sarah knelt down, touching the stone with trembling fingers. This was the third week something like this had happened. First, just the flowers. Then a blue scarf appeared, folded neatly beside the headstone. Now the stone. Michael examined the arrangement. The forget-me-nots formed a pattern that seemed intentional. Blue had been Ethan's favorite color. The teenager had developed a passion for birds, spending countless hours with his binoculars pointed toward the trees. After placing their own flowers, they spent time in contemplative silence. The question of who might be visiting their son's grave hung between them, unspoken but persistent. Michael called the cemetery office, but they maintained that the cemetery was too large to monitor every grave at all times. Sarah called their relatives and Ethan's friends. All denied visiting the grave outside of the memorial service. Sarah's sister suggested it might be one of Ethan's classmates, perhaps someone with a secret crush or a friend who hadn't felt comfortable approaching them. The next Sunday, they found a beautifully carved wooden bird against the headstone, a blue jay, Ethan's favorite. Sarah picked it up, running her fingers over the surface. Whoever left it knew Ethan well enough to understand his passion for birds. Michael watched his wife's expression shift from wonder to unease. This mystery visitor was bringing them both comfort and distress in equal measure. That night, Michael suggested setting up a small camera near the grave to catch whoever was leaving these tributes. Sarah's reaction was immediate and fierce. She argued that a cemetery was a sacred place, not somewhere to spy on people. After a long conversation, she reluctantly agreed to the camera, not because she approved, but because she couldn't bear the distance between them. They disguised a small motion-activated camera within their flower arrangement, positioning it to capture anyone approaching the grave. When Sunday arrived, they hurried to the cemetery earlier than usual. The blue forget-me-nots were there again, along with a small handmade bookmark. They collected the camera and rushed home to view the footage. They sat side by side, tension evident in their rigid postures. Michael fast-forwarded through hours of stillness until Wednesday afternoon appeared. A woman walked into frame, approaching Ethan's grave with measured steps. She appeared to be in her early 50s, her brown hair streaked with gray and pulled back in a ponytail. In her arms, she carried blue forget-me-nots and what looked like a small book. As she drew closer, her face became clearer. Sarah gasped. Michael froze. They both recognized her instantly, Diane Roberts, the woman who had carried Ethan in her womb 18 years ago. After struggling with infertility, they had worked with an agency to find a surrogate. Diane had been their match, kind, healthy, with 2 children of her own. Their contract had been clear: after birth, complete separation. They had paid her generously, and she had handed over their son without complication. That was supposed to be the end. Yet here she was tenderly arranging flowers at their son's grave, wiping the headstone with a cloth. The footage showed her placing a book at the base of the stone before sitting cross-legged on the ground. They could see her lips moving as if speaking to Ethan. After about 20 minutes, she stood, touched the headstone gently, and walked away, wiping tears from her eyes. Sarah had paused, her hands shaking, her face contorted with shock, confusion, and mounting anger. How had Diane known about Ethan's death? Michael sat in stunned silence. Unlike Sarah, whose anger was building visibly, his reaction was more complex. Sarah paced the room, listing all the ways Diane had violated their agreement. Michael suggested they think carefully before acting. He reminded Sarah that Diane had respected their boundaries for 17 years, never contacting them or attempting to insert herself into Ethan's life. Whatever she was doing now, she was grieving too. That comment only fueled Sarah's outrage. Sarah had been his mother and performed her duties while he was alive. And now, she carried the unbearable weight of his absence. Diane was nothing more than a biological incubator who had been compensated. After days of tension, they decided to confront her. The following Wednesday, they waited at the cemetery. When Diane appeared with her blue forget-me-nots, Sarah stormed toward her, Michael hurrying behind. Diane looked up in shock as Sarah approached. The recognition was immediate, her face paling. Before she could speak, Sarah launched into accusations, her voice trembling with emotion. Sarah demanded to know how Diane had found out about Ethan's death and how long she had been stalking their family. She reminded her of the contract they had signed. Diane would have no contact with the child she carried. Diane explained quietly that she had seen Ethan's obituary in the local newspaper. She had attended the funeral, standing at a distance where they wouldn't notice her. She apologized but explained that she too needed to say goodbye to the boy she had helped bring into the world. But Sarah wasn't satisfied. Something clicked in Michael's mind. The pattern she created was exactly how Ethan arranged flowers for his mother on her birthdays, an unusual spiral pattern he had developed on his own. How could Diane possibly know this? Michael interrupted Sarah's tirade, suggesting they continue somewhere more private. To both women's surprise, he invited Diane back to their home. At their house, Michael disappeared briefly into Ethan's room, returning with a stack of photo albums. He began showing Diane pictures of Ethan's life, his first steps, birthday parties, science fairs, and bird-watching expeditions. At first, Sarah sat stiffly apart, but gradually moved closer, drawn by the shared memories of her son. As they turned the pages, Sarah noticed that in most of Ethan's pictures, he tilted his head at a specific angle, as Diane did when listening. In another photo, Ethan's smile was a perfect mirror of Diane's. These small biological echoes suddenly seemed precious rather than threatening. This wasn't about Diane trying to claim maternal rights. It was about honoring a connection that, while brief, had been profound. She had never considered herself Ethan's mother. That role belonged solely to Sarah. But when she learned of his death, something broke inside her too. The blue forget-me-nots were her way of acknowledging that, while he wasn't her son, their lives had been connected in a unique and meaningful way. Sarah's anger gradually gave way to understanding. The small gifts Diane had left, the stone from a river where her own children had played, the scarf she had knitted while pregnant with Ethan, the bird carving that reminded her of the blue jays she had watched outside her window during that pregnancy, weren't attempts to claim him, but to share pieces of a connection only she could offer. In the months that followed, the three of them began to heal together. They visited Ethan's grave as an unusual family, bound by love for the same boy. Sarah brought her lilies, Diane, her blue forget-me-nots. The camera that had been installed out of suspicion had revealed something none of them expected: that family connections can transcend legal contracts, and that sometimes healing comes from the most unexpected sources.